What's up, guys? Welcome to Vintage Genetics, where it is all about classic bodybuilding. And today we're going to talk about creatine. So let's dive right into it. So, creatine. I'm going to talk to you about the dosage you're supposed to use, what creatine actually does, and most importantly to a lot of you guys, which form of creatine works the best. So let's actually start out with the last one. Which form of creatine works the best? You have all kinds of different forms. You have creatine monohydrate, which you all know, micronized creatine, and all other kinds of creatines out there as well that are more expensive, more soluble, smaller granules of creatine, etc. But when you look at the research of creatine, every single study, 99% of the studies that tell you that creatine works, has been done using creatine monohydrate. So, in my opinion, and what I use myself from experience, creatine monohydrate is the only creatine you should ever look to. And that's kind of strange, right? Because that's the cheapest form. Since when is the cheapest form of something the best version? Well, in the case of creatine, that is the case. Because it is so cheap, of course, supplement companies want to, try to find out different forms, try to come up with different formulas and different combinations of creatine to make it seem more appealing, to make it seem even better than the original, but there's nothing that's better than the original, guys. That's what you have to keep in mind. So, whenever you purchase creatine, buy the creatine monohydrate. So, now that we have established which form of creatine is the best, which is the monohydrate version, you first have to establish which company am I going to purchase it from, and it has to be a company that is reputable and that really produces high quality supplements overall, because you want the purity of the creatine to be high. Now, for the first thing after which type of creatine you need to take is how much do you need to take of it? So, the amount people like to say is usually 5 grams. Pretty much anyone in a gym, you ask how much creatine do I need, they will say either 3 to 5 grams. Some people like to use a loading phase, which we'll talk about very soon after as well, but 5 grams is the usual answer. But why 5 grams? If you start out versus when you have big arms already and a muscular body, why would those same 5 grams apply to the guy who weighs 60 kilos to someone like me who weighs 120 kilograms? Literally double the body weight. Just a short summary of how creatine is absorbed in the body. You take in creatine orally. A little bit is produced by the body itself, about 1 gram a day, but the rest you need to take in from your diet. There's some in the diet, again on average 1 gram in a typical diet, so not a bodybuilding diet, so 1 gram you produce yourself, 1 gram you get from the diet, and the rest you need from supplements. You need to take in as a supplement form. So the creatine goes into your body and is stored in skeletal muscle, aka simply muscle mass. So in every single muscle cell, creatine is stored and is going to be used for high energy exercise like lifting weights, sprinting, squatting, just lifting heavy weights in general. That's where we want to use it for as bodybuilders. So it's actually applicable to a lot of sports, not only bodybuilding, but also powerlifting, strongman, any high intensive endurance sports. It's all very useful. So for powerful movements that last a relatively short time. So since it's stored in muscle mass, shouldn't you take more creatine then if you have more muscle mass? Just looking at this from a logical perspective, not even looking at the studies that recommend certain things, just looking at it from if you trained for 5 and 6 years and you've built some kilos of muscle mass already, shouldn't those extra kilos of muscle mass be able to hold extra creatine, and would that 5 gram recommendation of before still be applicable to you right now? No, in my opinion and in my experience, that is not the case. And also some studies say that a higher amount of creatine actually results in better outcomes for strength and hypertrophy gains, which is what we want to use creatine for. So now the conclusion of how much you should use, how do we actually make up how much someone should use, and what's the main factor that everybody has in common that differs between people at the same time is their body weight. I weigh more than someone who's starting out because I've been working out for longer. So depending on how heavy you are, that should be the creatine dosage. So a very easy formula to use is 0.1 or 0.1 grams per kilo of body weight. So for me, I weigh around 120 kilograms. That means I need about 12 grams of creatine. Someone who's starting out, who might weigh 60 or 70, they need 6 or 7 grams. So of course the recommendation of 5 grams is usually based on people who have a regular amount of muscle mass, who don't weigh as much. So maybe their body weight is up there, but their muscle percentage that the body is composed of is lower than compared to a bodybuilder. So the one thing you have to look out for is if you are bulking, dirty bulking, and you're pretty fat, you have to be honest with yourself. Okay, I may weigh 100 kilograms or 225 pounds, but maybe actually my lean body weight is 80 kilograms. So based on the lean body mass, you should, calculate how much creatine you should use. So for that person, if you weigh 100 kilograms, but your body fat percentage is about 20%, use around 8 grams of creatine to be sure that you're not overusing it. Because one of the possible side effects of creatine is, gastric discomfort or diarrhea, stuff like that. So that's what people notice in the loading phase of creatine. When they have to take 20 grams every single day, they might get gastric distress, diarrhea, bloating, stuff like that. But that only happens if you use too much for your body weight. I've been using 12 grams for several months now, and nothing of the sort has happened to me yet. And while we're at it, explaining actually the creatine benefits, which a lot of people know, but just to be sure, what does creatine actually do? In short, it increases your power output in the first few seconds in explosive movements. So when you're doing a max squat, for example, the creatine helps produce energy to do those first few reps or those first few seconds of energy output to help you do eventually more work. So that's the first thing that creatine does. Also with sprinting, for example, allows you to sprint a couple more seconds extra because the first few seconds will be extended that you use the creatine phosphate stores. So in short, that's what happens in terms of performance. But for bodybuilders, even more importantly, you actually grow muscle because of creatine. It's directly and indirectly, and the indirect effect is first of all because of the training that you are able to go heavier, create more mechanical tension, more time under tension because you have simply more energy to do those reps. Secondly, the other effect would be that your muscle cells are holding on to more water, so intracellular water retention. So this is something that a lot of people worry about. Won't creatine make me bloated, hold water in my body? Do I hold extra water? Yes, you do, but you hold the correct kind of water, the water you want in your body inside the muscle cells, because the more water you can get inside the muscle cells, the more puffed up and blown up they will be, and that's what you want your muscles to be. You want the fluid to be inside the muscle cells, so not under the skin, but inside the muscles, and that's where growth occurs. Studies also say that when a muscle cell is swelled up for a longer period of time, and that's what creatine does, it swells it up more, gets more water inside of it, that produces signals to the brain to make hypertrophy occur even more or to a stronger degree compared to when the muscle cells would not be pumped up or not be swelled. And this is also a nice example of why the pump in the gym also works for muscle growth. Alright guys, so all in all, what should you know about creatine as a bodybuilder? You should take creatine monohydrate, the cheapest version of creatine, purchase it at a company that you trust and know produces high quality supplements so that the creatine you receive is actually a pure kind of creatine monohydrate. Secondly, The dosage, in my opinion, so it's my opinion first of all, is 0.1 grams per kilo of body weight. So if you weigh 100 kilograms, that's 10 grams of creatine. Then you can apply a loading phase, but in my opinion, it is not necessary because eventually your creatine stores will be saturated if you keep that dosage on a daily basis. Now, what I didn't cover yet is when should you take creatine. It doesn't really matter, but just to be safe, take it in your post-workout shake. But at the same time, if you can put it in your oatmeal in the morning, that's fine too. That's what I like to do. And because of the extra carbohydrates in such a meal, it produces more insulin, and the insulin helps pull in that creatine into the muscle cells, which is more beneficial. So either after training, which has been proven to work, or with a meal with some carbohydrates, mixing it up with your oatmeal, for example, works great. And then also just keep in mind while using it, you will see the scale weight go up. Initially, it will be because of water weight inside the muscle cell, so don't be afraid of it. When you're cutting down for a show, for example, and you start taking creatine in that cutting phase, you might actually increase the weight on the scale, but don't be afraid. It's the water weight you want to have in your body, inside the muscle cell, so be aware that that's going to happen when you take creatine monohydrate on a daily basis. And simply don't worry about it because it's the most proven supplement in the entire world that has been proven to work for muscle strength and muscle growth. So anyway guys, that was my sweet and short video about creatine. Well, short for my terms. If you have any more questions about creatine, I might actually do some extra videos about this, clarifying some points. Make sure to ask them down below, and if a lot of people like a certain question or comment, I might expand on that one in a separate video. I will also be doing more videos like this for sure about more supplements, like things like vitamin C, or the different kinds of whey, or a multivitamin, or curcumin, stuff like that, that people might find interesting to learn more about. What my opinion is, infused with some science here and there, just to get an overview of my experience and what has been tested in science and literature. So guys, I want to thank you for watching, and don't forget to stay golden.